Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
It's always Halloween at the Haunted House of Hamburgers, Long Island's only Halloween-themed restaurant. At Haunted House of Hamburgers, they are obsessed with both Halloween and hamburgers, so why not have the best of both worlds every day? Salivate over their delicious hamburgers during Boo Brunch, along with their Witch's Brew and Crypt Keeper cocktails. Or take a stab at the undead desserts, such as I Scream Sundays, with your bobbing for apple pie. My favorites are the Afterlife alcoholic shakes. I'd go for the Pentagram Passion Fruit, or the Exorcism Espresso Martini Shake, or my go-to, the Loch Ness Monster Lobster Rolls. This place is fun as hell. They even encourage you to come dine in, dressed in costume. Your kids will love that. Or, that could be one hell of a memorable first date. They're not going to forget that, right? Here's a little insider tip. For a far-out, trippy dining experience, ask your waiter for 3D glasses. It's pretty rad, let me tell you. Located at 330 Fulton Street in Farmingdale, New York, it's the restaurant that looks like a haunted house. You won't miss it, I promise. Make Haunted House of Hamburgers your year-round Halloween destination. Insomnomaniacs, join the chat monsters and fellow miscreants of the midnight hour for the Ghouligans YouTube live stream for a wild night flight of retro commercials, vintage trailers, indie short films, horror comedy, weird music videos, and featuring the occasional Matt Roran appearances. Horror hosted by your favorite funny monsters, the Ghouligans, as they stream a live online visual arts magazine and variety television show of the likes rarely ever seen, while also hosting live chat-along viewings of such other horror classic films like Carnival of Souls, House on Haunted Hill, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, The Werewolf of Washington, and one of my favorites, Manos, The Hands of Fate. This is late-night television the way you remembered. Subscribe to the Ghouligans YouTube channel and make sure to click on that notification bell so that you won't miss the next Ghouligans YouTube live stream. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. Welcome to The Offering with Jerry Horror, the show where we can have a quiet and frank discussion as adults about the things that matter to me, or at least that I think matter to me. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you get fine podcasts, and hey, stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, in 1980, the cocaine-fueled free love hangover of the 1970s had hit everyone hard, especially Hollywood. This film was shaping up to be another summer blockbuster, that is until the lead actor decided to quit. Roller Disco, one of the biggest bands in the world, and Australia's sweetheart, couldn't save this one. Roger Ebert called this movie a mushy and limp musical fantasy. This is the story of a movie that burned up the music charts but failed spectacularly at the box office. Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, it's me, Jerry Horror, host of this show, The Offering. I've been thinking about a lot of things, man, especially the summer. Summer memories. You know, you go back to the times when you were a little kid and you were in school. You had no cares in the world. Those days, you'd wake up early in the morning. You didn't want to wake up for school, but you'd wake up early in the morning during the summer because you know that you could eat cereal, play video games, watch movies that you weren't supposed to be watching, which I think at that point, I was around 5 or 6 years old, and I had just seen The Terminator, and it was amazing. It pretty much almost changed my life. Yeah, but it was amazing. Look, and I'm not going to lie. Full disclosure, this is The Offering. I might have paused when Linda Hamilton shows her tatas. I did. I did a lot. I did often. I think I wore that part out on the VHS. I would wake up so early on those summer days. And I remember my parents had a really big garden. They used to work in the garden. We had a dog named Junior, which I think is, I've said this, I think it's funny because, it's the whole thing with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. We named the dog Indiana. And I'm Gerald Finari Jr. So we had a dog that was named Junior. He was a mutt, he was a rescue. And he was a stupid dog. That dog was he was dumb as shit, but he wouldn't go into his doghouse. And we couldn't figure out why. So my father goes and he looks, he's like, why, Junior, why are you not going in your doghouse? So then he realizes there's a big hive of wasps that have gotten into the back underneath the doghouse. So Junior was actually pretty smart. He's like, nope, I'm not going in there. My father, Mr. Horror Senior, if you will, he had been known to partake in the devil's lettuce. Sometimes he had some really fucking harebrained ideas. And I think the other thing too is I just don't even realize it, but my dad was probably like 28 at the time or 30 because people had kids young. That's just the way it was. His brilliant idea was he was going to take lighter fluid and then just light the doghouse on fire. I have no idea. Now, I think originally this started out with him like, okay, I'll go to the back of the doghouse, I'll spray it on the nest, and I'll light it. Again, I'm a dumb little pudgy kid. I'm like, hey, can we go to McDonald's? That's what's going on in my head. So I'm standing there in between where the rear door is of the house, because that's where I'm going to need to escape to. He lights this thing on fire, and he runs. And he runs past me. He's like, Jerry, you gotta get out of the way. And he runs past me and just leaves my little chubby ass out there. The wasps swarm me, and they sting my titties. They they sting my young little titties. And I'm like, ah. So I finally run inside. And my father says to me, he goes, well, why didn't you run? And I was like, Dad, why didn't you just grab me? I'm like 40 pounds. What are we doing here? So I'm all stung up, and my mother's putting ice on it, and then she has to take the stingers out or whatever it was with like forceps, tweezers. Forceps are what I use in my penis. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and my mother says, what happened? And my father says, well, Jerry accidentally lit the doghouse on fire. My mother was like, Jerry, what the? She was like, oh my God. She was freaking out. And then my dad, he was he's still a funny guy. He says, no, I'm just kidding. He's like, I kind of lit the doghouse on fire. He's like, she's like, well, did you put it out? And we go in the back, and the doghouse is on fire, and it's lighting the fence on fire because we were so scared to run into the house away from the wasps, and I got stung. That was like priority. So yeah, we almost burnt down half of Brentwood that day. It was a very trying time in my youth. Listen, hey, if you enjoy this story, I'm writing a book, and I gotta tell you, man, it's a certified banger. It's got sex, drugs, and chubby little kids who can't get laid. Well, at least not until later. But man, I was a dorky little kid. We've all been there, right? I mean, come on, everybody can relate to that. I was such a nerdy little... I'm still nerdy. It's ridiculous. We just pulled up on Retrosaurus LI, which is the store. We did an ad for them. Great people there. They've got a full arcade. They've got all of this merchandise, like Nintendo stuff. They had a Golden Girls fleece blanket. I mean, it's crazy. But they built, they have like this whole Back to the Future. It's like the second Back to the Future where they have like the bar. It's like the malt shop. I don't know. Look, I like Back to the Future. The first film's great. Second film's pretty good. And the third film's a snore. And that's it. That's my hot take on that. Put it in your pipe and smoke it. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, book's coming. Gonna be good stuff. I'll take you back to the 90s. Gonna be good. You're gonna like it. I'm telling you, if you dig this show, man, this book is right up your alley. Hey, season 3 art was done by our friend David Graham, who is at the David Graham Collection on Instagram. He makes fantastic artwork. He's done artwork for every episode this season. And I got to tell you right now, you got to pull up to the social medias, because there is a really sexy photo of me as Olivia Newton-John in Xanadu. So, yo, Instagram. I refuse. I'm not calling it X. I'm calling it Twitter. Pull up the Twitter. Threads. It's at Jerry Horror. You know what it is. We got a banger of a show. You expect no less. We're not playing around. We're playing for keeps. You know what I'm saying? Like, other people, they're like, oh, I'm going to do a movie podcast. And it is the corniest shit. I'm sorry. Fuck it. I'm going to say it. It's like one guy is like, hey, do you know that Doc Brown... No, I don't give a shit. And then they'll tell some lame joke. I'm like, So listen, taking a big fucking chance here. I'm moving out of the horror ghetto. You know what I'm saying? I'm going into the Upper East Side with the Jeffersons. Moving on up, baby. Moving on up. No, look, there's still horror movies this season. And it's one of those things where, like, you have to take chances. And that's what all the episodes and films that we're talking about this season. It's big swings. So we took a big swing. And this episode is something I've wanted to do for a long time, because secretly, I love Xanadu. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Olivia Newton-John. Xanadu has the most famous movie review of all time. And it goes like this. In a word, Xanadu. Now, it kind of became like a theme that this movie was a notorious flop. And it was, largely. It didn't make the money they thought it would. But I just want to tell all of my listeners out there, I'm so happy that I get to do this movie, because it's so unhinged. Everything that goes on behind the scenes of this movie, it's insane.
Open your eyes and hear the magic. Universal Pictures announces the most dazzling romantic musical fantasy in years, Xanadu. Starring Olivia Newton-John, Michael Beck, and Gene Kelly.
Whenever you're away from me, wherever you go, you're never far away from me.
Lover, I won't take a backseat tonight. Ooh, lover, getting on my 2 feet.
It's a spectacular entertainment that will transport you beyond your dreams. Xanadu, where time stops and the magic never ends. Xanadu.
Now, some will say Xanadu, but others will say it's a surrealistic masterpiece inspired by Salvador Dali's swagger. I mean, yeah, you know, it's cool looking. If you were going to a multiplex, or you're going to the movies and you smoke a joint and you watch fucking Olivia Newton-John and a bunch of other women lit up, it is what it is, you know? So I have to do a little bit of table setting in order for us to get to Xanadu. So you're going to have to travel back to the year 1978. Grease had come out June 16th, 1978. On a budget of $6 million, Grease went on to make $500 million worldwide. $500 million? $500 million is like $1 billion now. Really, like if you think about it, Jesus. Inflation. Oof. Grease was a phenomenon. It was a stage play, and then once the movie came out, it seemed like nostalgia had been going kind of crazy. There's a lot of boomers, a lot of people that were older, and you had stuff like Happy Days, you had Sha-Na Na Na Na. I always add a na 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 extra, but that's because I love you. There was something in the air, and Grease was definitely a part of that puzzle. People were really going through their feelings about what this country was like after everybody came home after the Second World War. And I think it seemed like a simpler and more innocent time. You also have, around this time, you have George Lucas's American Graffiti. Yeah, that's another one where it's about cruising. You got a young Harrison Ford in that. Obviously, the world recognizes him as a big star. They say, this guy, he's a fucking carpenter for George Lucas. And hey, God bless. So Paramount begged. They made $500 million. They're begging. They're saying, John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John, please come back for a sequel. They offered both of them millions. They even said, like, whatever you want. If you do Grease 2 for us, we'll greenlight whatever, like another project that you want to do. We'll even sign you to a 3-movie deal with a negative pickup. They were willing to give each star 3 movie deals along with millions of dollars. Would be the biggest payday that they'd ever had. So subsequently, it never happens, obviously. But they do make a Grease sequel. Paramount would give way in 1982. It was Patricia Birch, who was the choreographer from the first film, who directed this one. And look, the choreography in those films is fantastic. You definitely see stuff like High School Musical and how it was influenced by a lot of those dance sequences. Grease 2 would end up starring Michelle Pfeiffer as the lead and Maxwell Caulfield and you know him. He's from Empire Records. Come on, let's not get into it. You know him. Rex Manning Day. Yeah, that's basically how that goes. So yeah, they cast the two of them as the leads. They figure we'll bring Grease 2 in under budget by getting mostly unknowns. An entirely new soundtrack had to be made and a score, everything for the second Grease film. It had to be all original. At first, Paramount wanted to save on the publishing, and they're like, well, we could do a couple of reprises from the first movie. And Patricia Birch was like, no, we can't be doing remixes of the previous stuff because it comes off as really cloying and desperate. Grease 2 cost $11 million. It ended up making $15 million in the United States and another $15 abroad. $30 million, $32 million, probably in that neighborhood. It comparatively to a movie that just made $500 million. I mean, look, they made their money back. They probably, marketing and whatnot, probably $3 million, $4 million, ads, newspapers, that kind of stuff. Things how you used to publicize a film back in the day and market it. The $30 million was not enough, though. They're like, we made $500 million. So Paramount says to themselves, this is because we didn't have John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. That's why this didn't work. Maybe. Probably. I think the first film came out 4 years earlier. If it made that kind of money, it played for like a year or two. They probably had, drive-ins and revivals of it. I love Grease 2. Grease 2 was one of those movies that was endlessly on HBO. When I was a kid, they were showing that at least twice a day during the day, every day for an entire summer. There's like a group of us that grew up in the 80s, and we know all the movies that HBO used to play. We would get like these free trials. We'd get like a free week or 2 free days. My dad would not subscribe to HBO. They're like, it's too much money. I don't even want to know what it is. Jesus, people paying, what are they paying now? Like $15.99 for HBO Max, whatever it is. I digress. This movie ends up coming in 5th place for its opening weekend, Grease 2. The movies that opened before it. Number 1 was Poltergeist. Number 2 was Rocky 3. Number 3 at the box office was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And coming in at number 4, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Come on. With that lineup, they had a wing and a prayer. I mean, look, it's counter-programming. We know about this. It's basically when there's a big movie coming out and you open something that is diametrically the opposite. For instance, Barbie and Oppenheimer. And studios will probably learn the wrong lesson from that. Like they're trying to do the Paw Patrol and Saw are opening the same day. Like, Saw Patrol. And here's the thing. The Barbenheimer thing can't be replicated. You can't. It was something that was grassroots and really started with people on social media. So you can't pray for that kind of publicity. You know, it's so rare. I like Grease too. I think that some of the music is even better and catchier. That's just my opinion. Who's that guy? I don't know. I'm not a singer, but yeah, it's like the whole, I don't know. When I was a little kid, I was always like, wow, so everybody thinks this guy's a nerd. And then he comes back with a motorcycle and like cool leather outfit. I was like, maybe I could do this. And then I realized that I was like 8 years old and like in third grade. And that was really implausible, especially the leather thing. You know, I don't know. It is what it is. I will tell you this, though. Can I tell you this little Jerry story? Little Jerry story. I saw George Michael's Faith, and I requested specifically that my grandmother find an amalgam of that jacket. Yeah, that was, oof. That was probably like 86, 87, and I'm dressing like George Michael. I got the stonewashed jeans on, and I've got a faux leather jacket, like a bomber jacket. It's kind of like the one that Tom Cruise wears in Top Gun. Yeah, I was terrible. I was not a fashion plate as a child, to say the least. I had to go into the Grease thing because it's important to the story. The part of Sonny Malone in Xanadu was specifically written for John Travolta, playing to his strengths and his dance talents. That was what they were going to build this movie on. Paramount ends up producing the somber and sensitive romantic drama Urban Cowboy. Urban Cowboy is basically Saturday Night Fever with country flavor. Instead, there's mechanical bull riding in Urban Cowboy. Yeah, that's just what you wanted, right? I don't know. It was weird. There was that whole time where it was like country chic. Sylvester Stallone did the movie with Dolly Parton. Oh my God. Rhinestone. Oof. Yeah. So there was like this whole country chic thing that was happening with Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers. And then he did the Gambler movies. They did all the Christmas specials on NBC. Yeah. Country chic was a thing. It's happened before and it's happening again. You know, all those bespoke bitches who are out with their big hats and their silly dresses, and it's bespoke. I don't even know what the fuck bespoke is. It's like something you made. It's like handmade or something. Like, I don't give a shit. There's like this whole weird TikTok culture of like girls who are like going country, and it's like, you're from Long Island, you're going country, you know. It is what it is. Yeah, your mother and father listen to like Biggie Smalls, but you're going country. Yeah. So I mean, Urban Cowboy does pretty good business. You know, nothing earth shaking. It's not a Saturday Night Fever. Paramount's desperately trying to get Travolta and Olivia Newton-John into another picture. As this is happening, Brian De Palma calls John Travolta, and Travolta's like, listen, he's like, I really want to shed this teen beat image that I have, and an opportunity to work with De Palma, you know, who people are considering the modern Hitchcock. This is the guy he wants to work out. You know, eventually they do the film Blowout together, which is a great movie. I got to tell you, John Lithgow's in that, Nancy Allen's in that. Really good movie. If you've never seen Blowout, after this podcast, you got something to watch. See, I'm doing all the hard work for you kids out there. Speaking of which, Universal Studios desperately wanted the musical icons to have an on-screen reunion. Somebody at Universal figured out what they were going to pay Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. So they basically were like, all right, we'll give them like double. We're talking in excess that both stars would get paid about $8 million each, which was a lot of money in 1979. Up until the 11th hour, Xanadu, it was planned as the Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta reunion on the big screen, singing, dancing. They stole your hearts 2 years ago in Greece, and they're back. They're back, and they're singing. I feel like we should be doing cocaine, producer Pete. I feel like this is a very cocaine-heavy movie. So we're definitely going to get down to business now. But from that call from Brian De Palma, it definitely changed everything, because it gave Travolta an opportunity to work with a real auteur who had a vision. More importantly, Universal didn't have Travolta under contract. And that was really what was burning their britches. We secured Olivia Newton-John. Now we just need Travolta to sign on the line and it's a go picture. Like, this will go right into production. Universal sends Travolta on a lavish vacation. They buy him a new Jaguar. I mean, come on. They go to all these crazy lengths. They throw him like a backlot party. They're like, hey, this is the Universal studio. This is what we do. We're going to take care of you. You're going to be part of the family. He goes with Brian De Palma and he makes Blowout and kind of just blows Universal off. And Universal was pissed. Dude, he was public enemy number one for, I think, a good decade at Universal Pictures. They didn't want to cast him because they had felt like he strung the studio along. I don't think so. I think De Palma offered him the part, and he was just like, this is a real movie. This is what I want to do. I don't want to be Vinnie Barbarino no more, you know? So it's an opportunity that he had to take. He took a big swing, just like we're taking right now. Universal was in quite the pickle at this point. So now we're thereabouts the end of 1978, the beginning of 1979, and they've got a go picture, and they have to figure out what they're going to do, because now they have Olivia Newton-John under contract. So somebody at Universal, you had like the guys who were running the studio, Brown and Zanuck, and they grew up being huge fans of musicals in the 1930s and 1940s. So they're like, okay, we don't have Travolta. Let's make Olivia Newton-John the biggest star in the world. Spare no expenses for a big Hollywood musical, just like the old days. So Xanadu is now an Olivia Newton-John movie. She's got top billing. And the crazy thing about Xanadu is that it was originally conceived as a low-budget roller disco movie. It was in the air. Disco is a very short window of time. It exists much longer. You know, it starts in the early 70s. Some say it was the Paradise Garage in New York. Some people say it came from the house parties in Chicago. But disco was a very urban and gay thing in the early 70s. And then it becomes like your mom and dad are going to the disco. It becomes like, you know, straight people get into it. But the straight people burned it out quick. It's a short window of time where it's like from 77 to like 1980, 81. What's crazy is there must have been something in the water, because in 1979, two other movies would come out. Skate Town, USA and Roller Boogie. Both came out in the year of our Lord 1979. And these were like quickie cash-ins. And I forget which one it is, but one of them has Linda Blair in it. The other one has Patrick Swayze. These were all like before they were stars. But these were cheapies. They were made super quick. Like they shot in 3 months and then released in another 2. It was pretty crazy. So with that being said, you've got two roller disco movies and they're like, oh, we really need to make some changes here because it's already in the marketplace. And Skate Town USA and Roller Boogie, fantastic movies. Definitely watch them because they're so anchored to that time and place, specifically 1979. Those are the type of movies that excite me the most. It's stuff and culture that they're just trying to cash in on. And ultimately they realize, they're like, Xanadu can't be like this. It has to be something bigger. The script undergoes the first of like many, many revisions. We're going to get into that. The first order of business was, we need to find a new leading man, ASAP. So if you know David Naughton from the Dr. Pepper commercials, and he was an American Werewolf in London, he was the number one frontrunner after Travolta to be the part of Sonny Malone. Director Robert Greenwald and producer Joel Silver had seen him in the Dr. Pepper commercials, and they said, this is the guy. He's singing, he's dancing, he's handsome, he's kind of got a Travolta swag. Ultimately, Naughton is unavailable because he's working on Midnight Madness, the cult hit from 1980, the Disney film. We recently rewatched it with a bunch of friends, and it's good. I like it. It's cute. I don't know if it holds up as much now. When I was a kid, like that was another movie that I think was on HBO, like on repeat in the early 80s. Oh, producer Pete just came up with another fun fact. It's Michael J. Fox's first film is Midnight Madness. And it's crazy because he's like a little kid in that movie. He's like a little shrimper. He's so cute. So we got to find a lead. Steven Guttenberg, who you might know as Steve Guttenberg, and Griffin Dunn, as well as Michael Biehn, all auditioned for the role of Sonny Malone. For whatever reason, did not connect with the producers. Steve Guttenberg goes and does the Village People movie, Can't Stop the Music, which was also made the same year as Xanadu. So kind of strange because that's a disco movie as well. Now, Joel Silver, who most famously produced everything from Jet Li movies to Lethal Weapon to Commando, eventually The Matrix, and even a few Seagal and Schwarzenegger joints, is the producer on this movie. This was like his first real big movie that he was working with. He would become one of the most powerful and influential producers of the 80s, but he was known for his tenacity and sometimes explosive temper. It should be noted, for the record, Xanadu is one of 3 disco musicals released in 1980. The others were The Apple, which is the Cannon film. Jesus Christ, I don't even know what kind of drugs you need to be on for The Apple. The Apple is wild. It's a recommend because it's so strange. And the other one was the Steve Guttenberg film, Can't Stop the Music. You see that Hollywood is cannibalizing it. The year before, they were doing roller disco, and now this year we're doing disco movies. It's appropriate for the time. You'd probably think to yourself, oh, this would be a home run, right? Peter Frampton was one of the top choices for Sonny Malone. Olivia Newton-John was desperately trying to get him on the picture, but ultimately Universal wouldn't allow him to be in the cast due to the critical and commercial failure of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was made in '78. Notorious failure with the Bee Gees. It was a musical film where they're doing the music of the Bee Gees doing the music of the Beatles. What are we doing? What is this? Who fucking greenlit this? What a bad idea. Universal desperately needed a leading man. They're in big trouble now because the film is in heavy pre-production and it's ready to start filming in less than a month. Enter Michael Beck. Now, Michael Beck a year earlier was in the cult film by Walter Hill, The Warriors. It's an amazing film, still holds up, great, definite recommend. Before that, he was relatively unknown. One of the producer's teenage daughters was absolutely in love with the actor. And to be perfectly honest, that's what got him cast. Now, allegedly, Michael Beck told the studio that he was able to sing and dance. He could not sing or dance. But it was a lie in order to get him the picture. So, for all intents and purposes, Michael Beck could sing and dance. But as forementioned, he could not. So we're off to a great start. We got a leading man who's got less than a month to learn this script that keeps changing by the day and evolving like a Pokemon. We're off to a great start. Yeah, this is... So now, allegedly, the original script for the film was an absolute disaster. People saw this script and they were like, ooh, did you see the script for Xanadu? It's a mess. So Silver hires Richard Christian Danis to write the original script again. He's like, rewrite whatever this bullshit is. He rewrites the screenplay, brings it back to Silver. Silver freaks the fuck out. He says he's gone on record saying it was one of the worst. The rewrite was the worst script he's ever read. What does he do? Silver gives the script to another guy, another screenwriter named Mark Reed Rubel, to rewrite. Guess what happens? Silver hates the rewrite of the rewrite. Now, allegedly, after a cocaine-fueled bender, Silver and Rubel, they were out all night partying in Los Angeles. The two ended back up at Silver's plush mansion in Brentwood, California. The story goes that a heated argument broke out between the two. Silver then locked Rubel in a spare bedroom with a few grams of cocaine and a bottle of wine. And he's yelling at the top of his lungs, fix it, fucking fix it, fix that fucking script. He locks him in the room. Next day, everybody wakes up. Silver's maid found Rubel passed out naked next to a typewriter. And finally, that afternoon, when Joel Silver eventually woke up from his exploits the night before, he's like, this script works. This works. I like it. We're good. But none of this really matters because the film would be rewritten every day on set. It was like something that was alive. It was like sentient. It was being rewritten so consistently by so many different people. And that's partly why a lot of this film doesn't work. Some folks have even stated that the film that we got was nothing like what was written. The script that they were about to shoot on was completely different from the film they make. It's pretty crazy, actually. They have to build a set for the actual roller disco club, which is called Xanadu. This set cost $1.3 million to fabricate, and it took months to build. And everything had to be modular and rearranged at the drop of a dime. There's parts in the movie where there's a big fountain in the middle of the disco, and it changes to whatever they need it to be because it's this fantastical and magical nature. This set, at the end of the day, started out as a $1.3 million project. They say it cost closer to $2.1 million. It was one of the most expensive sets at the time that had ever been built on Universal's backlot. They need something stronger, though. They know they've got Beck. They're betting big on Olivia Newton-John to carry this film and to make it a big hit. So they're like, let's get a star from yesteryear, from this old Hollywood, so to speak. They get Gene Kelly. You know Gene Kelly, Singing in the Rain, Anchors Away with Frank Sinatra. He pretty much ruled the 40s and 50s with big Hollywood musicals. By the 70s, he's starring in films like Viva Knievel, which was an American action film starring Evel Knievel as himself and Lauren Hutton. It's out there. I found it on Amazon Prime. It is bizarre because Evel Knievel cannot act, but we've made him the star of this movie. And they got Lauren Hutton and obviously Gene Kelly. They've got all these big actors around him trying to elevate it. But Knievel just was not a good actor. He was no Elvis. Kelly was worried that this is the film they're going to remember me for, the stupid Evel Knievel movie. I did all these great movies, and now I'm starring with this fucking glorified stuntman who can barely act. I just have to preface this. When the big dancing scene comes up with Olivia Newton-John, he made them close the set and only have the cameraman there. That was the only way that he would dance, and he felt that he could be simpatico with Olivia Newton-John in order to get the dance sequences the way he wanted. And they're impressive. If you watch them, you forget that this is like a 70-year-old man, and he's doing all this, and it's fantastic. It's a throwback. Sadly, this would be Gene Kelly's final film. His health would decline in the 1980s, and in 1996, he would pass away from a severe stroke that had left him paralyzed. Now, here's a good part about Xanadu. The dance choreography was done by a young Kenny Ortega. You know, he would go on to make Newsies, Hocus Pocus. He did the dance choreography for Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller, and even Dirty Dancing. So obviously, he's probably the most on-screen iconic choreographer for any of these films. I mean, come on, look at the resume. It's insane. He's still making stuff. He's making stuff for Disney. It's crazy. Oh, I have to mention this because this might be the wildest fact of them all. There was a comic book tie-in for Xanadu. It had a more fleshed out story. Did I say flushed? Oh boy. Yeah. It's par for the course. So the Marvel Comics adaptation was published as Marvel Super Special number 17. So I just felt you needed to know that that's how big Xanadu was. Universal Pictures paid Marvel Comics to make a super special issue. Now, the Pan Pacific Auditorium in Los Angeles that had been used for the exterior shots of the nightclub. Now, obviously, the interiors were shot on Stage 4 at Hollywood Center Studios. But the Pan Pacific Auditorium was known for professional wrestling. It had a very deep-rooted history in the community. Sonny refers to the auditorium as a dump, which was a fair characterization by the Pan Pacific, because all the beautiful Art Deco stuff was starting to fall apart and rot, and it was just sad. Even in the movie, he jokes they used to have wrestling here, which was a true statement about the auditorium. Unfortunately, the Pan Pacific Theater would be consumed by a fire a decade later, burned straight to the ground. Now, ultimately, problems begin to arise. We're like a month into shooting. Olivia Newton-John stated that entire portions of her script were changing hour to hour. And this is where things get really fun. Because it's 1979 and we're in Hollywood, cocaine is flowing like the great rivers of the Nile. It is insane. There is so much cocaine on the set of this movie. There were dozens of dancers for this film. Dozens and dozens of people that they had to bring in because you needed people who could do the roller skating, who could do the choreographed numbers, ballerinas, people who were gymnasts. From what I've heard, and this is another allegedly, a lot of them were working like 12 to 18-hour days because the choreography was just so intense and needed to be so precise. So a lot of them are sleeping there. Allegedly, what happened was all these dancers were sleeping together, and at night they were having like veritable orgies that producer Joel Silver would attend. You know, he was the one buying the blow. He's got the money. You know, it is what it is. But there were orgies many nights on the set of Xanadu, the $2.1 million set. At this point, Universal's just dumping money into the film. They don't even know what they're doing, but it's this weird time where everybody's on drugs and everything is high stakes. And they figure Xanadu is going to be our big Christmas film for 79, right? At this point, that was not happening. There was no way on God's green earth that they were going to get this movie out by Christmas. Due to delays and egos, the film would be rescheduled for August 8th of 1980. For some of you who don't know, there's Fuck You, It's January, and there's Fuck You, It's August. Like this month, as I'm recording this, I saw Meg 2, The Trench, and I saw Strays. It's generally the time of year, especially August, that they just dump the movies that they don't think are going to do good. Like they dumped Gran Turismo, they dumped The Blue Beetle this year, because you don't have much faith in these films. The last 2 weeks of August are generally some of the quietest weeks in all of movie theaters. The last 2 weeks of August, Americans just do not go to the movies the way they do earlier. So yeah, last 2 weeks of August, absolute dead zone at the movie theaters. Shockingly, Universal, they saw dailies and they really believed in the project. They're like, this is going to be our big musical. It's going to be a return to form of old Hollywood. Because let's face it, the people who were running the studio at the time, they're influenced by these big pictures, you know, these big Hollywood musicals.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
If you like vintage and retro style, you'll be shopping at these two shops. Paper Doll Vintage Boutique and Paper Doll Curiosity Shop. Long Island's premier shops for vintage, retro, gifts, and more. Paper Doll Vintage in Sayville has all one-of-a-true-kind vintage clothing and accessories for the true vintage lover, while Paper Doll Curiosity in Patchogue carries retro, novelty gifts, toys, clothing. They've got something for everybody. Got something for the whole family. You want the credentials? Paper Doll Vintage Boutique has won first place in Best Vintage Clothing Store in the Long Island Press's Best of Long Island. 7 years in a row. Undefeated. Can your vintage and retro store say that? I'm going to tell you what, probably not. Because of the unique nature of the items sold there, at both stores, the shop has become a local hub for artists, the community, hosting monthly art shows, classes, events, and even fashion shows. You got to check this out. You got to come down. You got to see it. From theme party goers, theater stylists, companies, photographers, designers, all facets of the industry. How about that period film project? You know, the one that you've been thinking of that needs authentic wardrobe and props? Paper Doll Vintage. Paper Doll Vintage Boutique and Curiosity Shop specializes in distinctive items that are hard to find anywhere else. One of a kind. One of a kind. And you're one of a kind, and you deserve that. Shop paperdoll.com and express your personal style. Calling all foodies, Northern Queens residents with a sweet tooth have found a new spot to sink their teeth into. Fern and Aurora's handcrafted French and Filipino-inspired desserts and pastries. Located next to the Little Neck LIRR, this cute little gem of bakery features many popular Filipino ingredients with all of their desserts. With a rotating menu to keep things interesting, one of the best things I absolutely loved, was their honey cake. Sweetness perfection, and they add a textural touch to their honeycomb. I inhaled that real quick, let me tell you. And of course, you gotta try the ube cupcake. Ube is the hot new thing. Filipino foodies have always known about it. Their Filipino donuts seem to be the most popular items, selling out by 10 a.m. every day. and their Basque burnt cheesecake was worth the drive. I'm drooling over here just thinking about it. You've heard about it. Now is the time to get your own ube coffee or deliciously cold halo halo, and they have introduced their Milo frozen hot chocolate. God, this sounds amazing. Try something new. Fern and Aurora, located at 3902 Little Neck Parkway, New York. Ube or not ube? That is the question. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Hara. Got a question or story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhara@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhara. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhara. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. Universal knew that they needed a hot band on the soundtrack. This needs to be a hybrid, because everything in this movie is a hybrid. You got all the stuff from the 40s and 50s, you got stuff that's disco, and they figured we need something to draw in young people. We need a hot soundtrack. They called the Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones said no. They called Blondie. Blondie said no. Cheap Trick said no. And then even further down the line, Supertramp turned the movie down. So they're like, holy shit, how are we going to do this? Now, luckily, the guys in Electric Light Orchestra were fans of these big musicals. And they said, yeah, hell yeah, we will definitely come and do your soundtrack to Xanadu. The soundtrack ends up going double platinum in the US and gold in the UK. It spawned 5 top 20 singles: Magic, Xanadu, I'm Alive, Suddenly, and All Over the World. The soundtrack is a global success. I mean, all over the world. All over the world. That's the song there. I am such a bad singer. Just producer Pete, man, put some auto-tune on that shit. Even before the movie comes out, the soundtrack is released a month ahead of time on June 27th. And this thing is just a banger. Like the LP, it's just selling. It's going like hotcakes. People are loving this soundtrack. So this is a good sign. Everything else has gone wrong on this production, but they put the soundtrack out, and it's the first thing. And look, I'll be honest with you, and I'm sorry to say it, but the best part of Xanadu is the music with Electric Light Orchestra. That's really where the stuff shines. It is what it is. So enter Don Bluth, who had recently left Disney. He was considered the messiah of animation at that point. Disney's 9 old men taught him everything they knew, and Don jumped ship. And the people at Disney always took offense to that he was under the learning tree of all these masters, and Disney thought that Don Bluth was going to save the company. And ultimately he decides, he's like, I don't want to work for you guys anymore. I'd rather be in business for myself and do things that I am passionate about and not be under the thumb of the Walt Disney Corporation. So according to the special features on the last recently released Blu-ray, the cartoon sequence in the movie was added because the filmmakers needed to include an extra song that had been written for the movie. Contractually, the song had to be in the movie, otherwise they were in breach of contract and would have to pay millions of dollars to Electric Light Orchestra's record label in the United Kingdom. Now, reshoots would be too costly, so they figured it was cheaper just to hire Don Bluth and have him do the animation. The problem is, as you kids know, animation takes time. This is hand-drawn animation. This isn't CGI. This isn't Pixar yet. This is people who put the pen and the ink to the paper. You know, they do the thing, the cell. I don't know. I don't know how to make cartoons. It's not what I do. This is The Offering with Jerry Hara, not Jerry's House of Pancakes or Jerry's House of Cartoons. You get what I'm saying? I don't know how they do that stuff. Don's got a rush. He's in a big rush because it was brought to him so late. The deadline, the release date, it's all looming over his head. So he outlined the segment in 2 days with storyboards, which if you've ever tried to do that, that is a Herculean task, also considering that this is not live action, it's completely animation. So Kenny Ortega helped Don create an animatic, which had been done at Disney with all the princess films like Snow White, Cinderella. They would have a real woman, she would dance, they'd record it, and that would be the template for what the character was doing. So Kenny Ortega, when you see the characters, the princess and the prince, that's Kenny Ortega. He's doing the choreography for both of them. Yeah, the animation sequence is quite impressive. I dig it. I'm a big fan of Don Bluth. I mean, come on. Land Before Time? How can you not? Joel Silver is pulling his hair out. He's developed a really nasty cocaine habit. He's hustling to get this film out. No matter what he's got to do, it's got to get out. We flubbed the Christmas release. It has to go into theaters in August of 1980. It's insane. It's just insane. So, one way or the other, they end up finally getting this movie put together. So in May, and remember, the release date's in August, they've got a work print of the movie that they put out. And they're like, all right, let's do some press screenings. So, they're supposed to have the press screenings at the end of May. Universal cancels them. Because someone at the studio saw the movie, and they're like, this is bad. This is a flop. We're in big trouble. So Universal cancels all the press screenings, suggesting to the media that they were not confident in the film. And now the Universal Studio brass that had greenlit this movie and spent millions of dollars to get it made are like, we've got a bomb on our hands. For instance, now there's like 3,000 theaters in the country, okay? So back in the day, there was a lot less. But you figure like 1,200 screens would have been like a big release back in 1980. Xanadu was supposed to open on 949 screens. No one knows. It's allegedly Universal didn't strike all those extra prints. They only struck 249 prints of the movie, and the attendance for those screenings was very low. It's Monday morning quarterback bullshit, okay? It's one of these things where Universal was like, oh, well, if we had gotten it into more theaters, it would have made more money. But they knew exactly what they were doing. They were setting the movie up to fail. So much like today, we see all this stuff like where these studios, they make a movie and they just scrap it like Batgirl. They were basically going to write this movie off as a net loss before it had even come out. Now, mind you, as this film is coming out, Electric Light Orchestra has the #1 single in the country with the song Xanadu. And the soundtrack is still tearing up the charts. The movie comes out. It does come out on August 8th. Variety went venomous, and they said this was the headline the day after it came out, because there were no preview screenings, there were no critic screenings, and it became one of these morbid curiosity for most of the critics in the media at the time is like, what are they hiding? What is in this film that they don't want us to see? Variety's front page reads, a stupendously bad film whose only salvage and salvation is its music. Roger Ebert, I'm part of the cult that loves Roger Ebert. I think he was one of the most brilliant minds. If you go and you read his writings on film, the guy is he's a genius. I mean, Roger Ebert notoriously wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which I love. That's a great movie. Who doesn't love that movie? Lots of nudity, lots of buxom gals. Woo! He generally liked these movies. Anything that was campy or silly, he was championing it. He also championed a lot of genre films. There were some that he didn't like. Friday the 13th, him and Siskel, man. Woo! Those Friday the 13th movies really upset those guys. He gave the film 2 stars out of a possible 4, describing the film as a mushy and limp musical fantasy. It had a confused story, redeemed only by Olivia Newton-John's high spirits and several strong scenes from legendary screen idol Gene Kelly. Ebert basically argued that all of the dance sequences had been developed more for a live stage show than an actual film. He was saying that the actual dance sequences themselves weren't shot correctly, that everything needed to be shot a little further back and not as up close. And as we've watched this movie, you can tell, like, they didn't know how to properly shoot some of these dance sequences. And it shows. It sucks because these people, man, they're performing their hearts out. With a combination of contemporaneous and modern reviews, Xanadu today still holds a rotten rating of 30% from Rotten Tomatoes, and that's based on 43 reviews. And the consensus states, not even spandex and over-the-top musical numbers can save Xanadu from questionable acting, unimpressive effects, and a story uncumbered by logic. Notorious film critic Janet Maslin wrote in her review, Xanadu is desperately stylish without having any real style of its own. Oof. So enter John Wilson. They used to have dollar theaters when the films would go like second and third run. We had them. Those were great after the movie had run for a couple of months. Quickly, though, Xanadu was put on a double feature with Can't Stop the Music because they're both disco movies. So he's at a dollar theater watching this double feature of these films. He says, these movies are so bad, we need to have an award show for terrible movies. So he creates the Golden Raspberry Awards, known as the Razzies, an annual event dishonoring what is considered to be the worst in cinema for that given year. Robert Greenwald won the very first Golden Raspberry Award, and the film was nominated for 6 other awards. I mean, look, the Golden Raspberries, it's stupid. It is what it is. I find it amusing. It's irrelevant. They still exist, but at this point, it's irrelevant. But it's funny because, like, John Wilson, when they had the first ceremony, quote unquote, it was like in his living room at his mother's house, which I think is pretty funny. Yeah, Robert Greenwald flipped shit, the director of this movie. He was very upset that he won this Golden Raspberry. It wasn't even that big of a deal, but I think that both movies were such big flops that people just kind of latched onto it like, yeah, these are the stinkers of the year, and now we have an award show for it. Believe it or not, William Friedkin was the runner-up for Worst Director of the Year for Cruisin', just so we're keeping track. Also on this list, just to show how like you can be on the wrong side of history, Stanley Kubrick was also Worst Film, The Shining, and Worst Director, The Shining. So, look, the Raspberries didn't always get things right, because a lot of times the movies, like I think The Thing won Worst Picture of 82, and like people love it. So like all these movies that the Golden Raspberries went after, 10 or 20 years, they're like big cult hits. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems that this guy who runs these Golden Raspberries does not like the gays. He is not a friend. He definitely did not like Can't Stop the Music and Xanadu enough to create this big spectacle. So no matter what you do, whatever you create, whether it's good art or bad art, it begets other things. And like it or leave it, the Golden Raspberries were pretty much invented because of Xanadu. In closing, let me just say this. The Golden Raspberries haven't been relevant in 20 years, and most of the movies that they nominate are fucking awesome. So I don't care what they say. So ultimately, we get to the release of this film. Domestically and internationally, it makes $22 million. Now you say, well, it made $22 million. Well, the movie itself cost $20 million, and then another $5 million in advertising. So basically they lost $3 million. It was actually stated to be more, but at this time, like, it's very hard to get a lot of these numbers. Like, studios at that time, pre-internet world, they were able to do a lot more creative financing where they could hide things, bury things, charge things off. I think ultimately Xanadu, based on what I've read, probably cost closer to $26 million. So right out the gate, they lost $1 million. They're in the red from the second the movie came out. Ultimately, MC Universal released the soundtrack in the United States. Electric Light Orchestra's label Jet Records put it out in the United Kingdom and other territories. Reports say that they made close to $10 million on the record sales total. Here's the thing, though. It is 1980, and it is August. Where's disco at this point? Most people will tell you that disco had peaked between 78 and 79 with aforementioned heterosexual consumers. People say that disco had been born on Valentine's Day 1970 when David Manis opened The Loft in New York City, which was a boys' club, and it's exactly what you think it is. There's a sharp decline. People really seem to turn on disco, especially that heterosexual audience that they love doing the hustle, but then 2 years later, they're like, fuck disco, burn it down. It's just a weird thing that happens. Also, What's starting to burn up the charts in 1980? New wave. New wave is coming. Dance music is starting to rear its head. Pop music. We are now firmly in the age of the synthesizer. So sonically, we're going from stuff that had been a little bit more actual instrumentally based. ELO, they use electronics, of course, but it was still based in real instruments. And this is where everything's starting to turn. You got groups like Depeche Mode, the Eurythmics. It's all changing. The landscape is changing in music. And obviously this film came out on VHS and Betamax. It didn't get a DVD release until 1997. And I think that's whereabouts I saw it proper. There was still Borders, Books and Music at that time. I remember going out with my friends. We'd look for shitty movies. And one of the guys there was like, "Oh, you want a shitty movie?" And man, we got really fucking high and we watched Xanadu and we could not stop laughing. It's like the perfect movie. I'll be honest. Listen, this is the best thing I'm going to tell you. The way that you screen Xanadu, okay, if you're doing these, we talk about the movie parties, movie nights, get everybody nice and kind of fucked up, and then don't say anything, just throw Xanadu on and see what happens. Now, it's either going to go over like a rotten tomato, or like my friends and I in 97, we loved it. We thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. For all you physical media nerds, just like me. Xanadu was re-released on Blu-ray June 24th of 2008. That's the best version possible that you can find now. It is called the Magical Music Edition. Now, you would think that Xanadu was a cultural oddity lost to time. Well, that is until it gets a little bit of what we would call a Broadway musical. The $5 million musical adaptation of Xanadu began previews on May 23rd of 2007. The show, which humorously parodies the plot of the film, ends up being a surprise hit. It gets rave reviews for its satirical approach to the material. This was kind of new, like we're putting a spin on something that was campy and we're making it even more profane. It ends up getting nominated for like several Tony Awards, and it wins a couple too, which is like insane. Unfortunately, the Broadway production closed on September 28th of 2008 after 49 previews and 512 performances. Once it closed down, a successful national tour followed that went on for 5 years. That is insane. So ultimately, look, I guess what we've learned from all of this nonsense is that no matter what you do, the way your art is perceived, it lives on and it influences other people. I mean, look, if you would have said, you know what, in almost 27 years later, we're going to do a musical of Xanadu and it's going to be a big hit and people are going to go nuts over it. It's going to be critically acclaimed and win awards. I didn't have that on my bingo card, so yeah. Folks, it's that time of the episode where we get to my favorite part, unhinged reviews. Here we go. We got Loretta McDonough. Is it McDonough or McDonough? I think it's McDonough. I'd like to McDonough. That was terrible. I'm sorry. She has a verified purchase on Amazon. She gave it 5 stars. And she says, it showed up. Reviewed in the United States on August 7th, 2023. Wow. So that was the it showed up was the headline, and the actual body of the review is, it came today but said it was delivered yesterday. My husband loves this movie. I do not. 5 stars. This one's even better because it's really short and sweet. Raul Lara, this is a verified purchase on Target. The headline is Oldies. The review? Okay. That's July 9th, 2023. 5 stars. This is another verified purchase from Amazon, written by Graphics. I'm sure that's a real name. This was reviewed in the United Kingdom on May 1st, 2023. These are all from this year. I just want to state for the record, these reviews are all from this year. The first time I saw this film was when I was 14, and I didn't think I would see it again. Now I'm addicted to it. Xanadu rules. 5 out of 5 stars. Come on. This is like, it's great. Even the guy who says it was okay, he gave it 5 stars. That's better than okay, pal. I'm sorry. What is the legacy of this film? Yes, it is a bizarre oddity from another time. But as I have stated before, that whenever you make art, whether it's bad, good, indifferent, it will beget great art. It will influence people to make wonderful things, I promise you. And that's why it's important, because you might not be the one that saves the world, but you might be the one that influences the person that will. Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig are on the press tour for Barbie, which has now made almost $1.5 billion as of this podcast recording. And they basically both said at the same time, they said, what was your biggest influence for this film? And they both said at the same time, Xanadu. So, that being said, if anything, Xanadu went on to basically help birth one of the biggest movies of all time now, and the highest grossing film for any female director. And I'm quite sure at this point, Margot Robbie can do whatever she wants at Warner Brothers. If she wants to go to the CEO's desk and take a dump on it, she could do it, because she's got that Barbie money now. Yeah. Oh, shit, I forgot. I had one more unhinged review. Sorry, I can't stop. I'm so sorry. Suzanne R. This is on Walmart. My mom loves this movie, and she's a pain in my ass. You can't. There's no stars or numerical ratings for that one. This one's good too. Le Gremlin. It's a French gremlin. From IMDb writes, I have a confession to make. I think this movie rules. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you know what? It's my opinion, and I don't think I should have to feel ashamed. So there. Folks, yeah. It's, look, man, I'll tell you what. You got to be in the right headspace for Xanadu. And I don't know if cocaine helps or hurts this film, but, give it a shot. That's right. I'm not like Joe Rogan or Mark Maron. Jerry's like, fuck it, do drugs, eat candy. Do whatever you want. I don't care. No, I do care. I'm not like a heartless person, but yeah. So look, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I did my best to put it together. I feel like a lot of what transpired during the making of Xanadu could never happen again. No studio would ever dump this much money into a film. I mean, hey, look, I will say it though. Barbie's high concept, okay? It's got musical numbers. It's a big swing that paid off, unlike Xanadu. So there. I don't know. I don't even know what the moral of the story is. It's like I said, you make something good, people might dig it. You make something bad, people might dig it. Just take the chance, take the shot. Because one way or the other, you're probably wrong. Is that right? You're probably wrong. You might be right. That's a Billy Joel song. All right, that's it. Jerry's had too many Red Bulls and too many 5-hour energies. And look, I do my best, all right? People thought I was crazy. They said, Jerry, what are you doing an episode on? I said, I'm doing an episode on Xanadu. So you took the ride with me, and we did it together. Will this episode be a classic? Probably not, because anything that Xanadu touches, except that Broadway musical, is a hot mess. Except the soundtrack. And that's weird, man. The soundtrack did very well. The Broadway musical did very well, but the movie tanked. You just can't make sense of this stuff sometimes. Hey, don't forget to subscribe wherever you are. Leave a nice rating. Go on Spotify, go on Apple, go on YouTube. We're everywhere. We are literally everywhere. Write us a nice review. Go in the comments. Try to stump me. Send me a fun fact that you don't think I'll get right, but I will get right because I have no social life and I'm making this podcast, and that kind of sums everything up. Follow me on social media at Jerry Horror. I'm everywhere. Literally. TikTok. We're everywhere. Threads. X, which I still feel weird saying about. X sounds like a gangbang site, right? Like it sounds like weird. Like my daughter was naughty. I'm sorry. I'll be good, Pete. Regardless, I'm Jerry Horror. This has been The Offering. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. I'm very sorry. Produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or a story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit us up at Twitter @jerryhorror or on Instagram @jerryhorror. You getting the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are provided for you and your family. I want you to enjoy. Just join us next time for another offering.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.